Hello, fellow Rebel Capitals. Hope you're well. So we have big news in the jobs market. And as you guys remember, this week is going to be epic. We have the JOLTS numbers today. We have ADP tomorrow. And then we top off the week with the non-farm payrolls. So let's go into the JOLTS numbers today. And the key takeaway is the amount of job openings are still a lot lower than the amount of people who are unemployed. And if you remember by watching if you guys have been watching the videos, you remember we've been talking about how this is a fundamental shift. This is a paradigm shift in the labor market where we went from having, let's just say, this many job openings and we had this many people unemployed to now we have this many job openings and this amount of people unemployed. And that's when you can really tell the labor market is deteriorating quickly. And obviously, the labor market is the key component here with the overall economy. So let's go into Zero Hedge. They got a great article on this. And then I want to focus specifically on construction jobs, guys. That's really where the rubber meets the road. So let's go over to Zero Hedge. Go all the way to the top. Ugly JOLTS shows most unemployed versus job openings. The plunge in hiring and quits. So it was actually a little bit above expectations. So that was kind of good, but it was still a really ugly data point, or the report itself was still ugly, although slightly higher. Okay, so let's check this out. Job openings remain depressed, if rising modestly from the upward revised July print of 7.2 to 7.227. The estimate was 7.2. So just slightly higher than the estimate, but we're not at the place, or we didn't jump back up to that level where there are more job openings than applicants, which is where you would like to be in a labor market that was strong and resilient. So here's the monthly change. We had a big, starting in June, big hit, a lot lower, and then just kind of flat line here in the most recent report. The number of job openings decreased in construction. I was talking about that, minus 115,000. Why is that so important? Let's go over to a chart, Fred chart of construction jobs. And you can see this is a very good indicator and often a leading indicator as to the economy going into a recession. And a recession, the NBER would actually define as a recession, not just the recession we have been in for 75% of Americans over the last, call it 2.5 years. Let's shoot back to that Zero Hedge article. And yeah, here we go. Here's the breakdown, guys. Let me try to get rid of this ad. Okay. So we've got total, and this is where you can see, just in August of 2024, the job openings 7.649. Now, that would be million. And we fast forward to today. So in the last 12 months, we are down, call it 422, looks like, 1,000 job openings. And the real important component there is not just the fact that the job openings have gone down, but the amount of unemployed people that we have gone up to the point where there's a spread of, I think, around 150,000. We'll get into that in just a moment. So here's the big, shoot. I don't know why it's not letting me. But right here, guys, you can see the job openings in July of 2025. 303,000, and we just get a plummet down to 188, and that is on construction, a very, very important component that gives you kind of a proxy as to what's happening in the overall labor market, which is a proxy for what's happening in the overall economy. So then they talk about how the government shutdown could increase or exacerbate this. Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but the government shutdowns, as in terms of market, outlook and what the market does, it's kind of a nothing burger. Now, it is true this one could be a little different because those layoffs could be more permanent with what they're doing with Doge and kind of the attitude the Trump administration has towards government workers, which is one thing I completely agree with Trump on and the administration, is we need fewer government workers, not more government workers. So I know I read a story today and they were kind of saying it was a bit of an apples to oranges comparison because before, what would happen when you had the government shutdown is those workers would just be laid off or temporarily laid off, and then as soon as they revised, or as soon as they not revised, that's not the right word, as soon as they reconciled everything and got people back to work, as soon as they agreed to a a solution on whatever it is the government's trying to do here, they bring the workers back and they pay them for the time that they were off. Where this time around, they might just say, "Okay, you're laid off, but you ain't coming back. Here's the pink slip." But even if that happens, I don't think it really would impact the stock market too much. I still think it's a nothing burger. Okay, here we go. And sure enough, after 4 years of the US labor market dodging a bullet, its luck has finally run out because whereas in June the labor market was still supply constrained, that would mean, and supply constrained means, I think basically what they're saying there is that the amount of job openings is higher than the amount of workers. So the supply of workers is constrained there. I think that's what they're trying to say. When there were 342,000 more job openings than jobs in the job openings. I think what they're trying to say is there's 342,000 more job openings than people to fill those jobs, at least unemployed people. In July, we were finally back to demand constrained when 28,000 fewer job openings and unemployed workers. That's what I think they were trying to say in the sentence above. The first negative print this series since April 2021. 1 month later, it's gotten much worse with 157,000 more unemployed than job openings. So even though we have a few more on the job openings, we've got way more on the unemployed side of the equation, which obviously increases that spread. That was the 150 that I was thinking about earlier. The highest differential since March of 2021. Yeah, here's that spread. It's a great looking chart. And now what I want to do is I want to go to another data point that came out today that is consistent with what we're seeing with this big paradigm shift in the labor market with the jolts. And that paradigm shift I'm referring to is, of course, there being a lot more job openings, or excuse me, a lot more unemployed than job openings. That means, how would economists say that? They have a technical term for that. That's right on the top of my, oh, what is it? It's excess capacity in the labor market. That's what they would say. Excess capacity in the labor market. Okay, but now let's go over to the conference board. And we had consumer confidence numbers come out today as well. And as you probably guess, we had a further deterioration. And I know a lot of people really harp on the University of Michigan survey, but this I don't think is as political. So a little bit more signal and a little less noise. But they point out that anything under, I had it pulled up here, anything under 80 right here. Expectations have been below the threshold of 80 that typically signals a recession ahead since February of 2025. So let's go down to the chart they're referring to. That would be the blue line. So expectations dipped down. They really went down here in February. They've gone back up to a certain degree. I think this is due to people not, I think this big move down was due to tariffs or the expectations of tariffs and the uncertainty. And we've had a move back up, say, it's not so bad, but it still isn't above that yellow line, which would indicate like recessionary conditions. And this last month, we've seen a tick back down. So it's going in the wrong direction. Now let's go back to the Zero Hedge article. I didn't read this. Let's check this out. While the job openings data was ugly and potentially the first harbinger of a coming recession, things were even uglier below the surface, starting with hiring, where the number of new hires tumbled by 114,000, the lowest since June of 2024. While at the same time, the number of people quitting their job, also known as the take this job. We'll try to keep it kid friendly here. You guys, I'll highlight. I'm not sure that's exactly what it's called. I think Zero Hedge might have been making that one up. But that also slumped by 75,000 to 3.091 million, the lowest since 2025. Why is that number important? This would be the quits rate, I think is the actual technical term. Because if a lot of people are quitting, the reason they're likely quitting is because they think they can get a better job. But if you have fewer and fewer and fewer people quitting, they're doing so because they look out and they're talking to their friends, their family members, and they're like, I don't know, you should probably keep that job you've got, because if you do quit, it's going to be extremely hard to maybe find an equivalent job, or it's going to be extremely hard to even find a job, period. And so that's usually another indication that the labor market is getting extremely soft. And so that would be representative, or that would be represented by this red line. Yeah, that's the quits rate. And then the hiring, like I said, that's going down as well. How to make sense of this ongoing deterioration? As I said last month, this is Zero Hedge. It likely has to do with the DOL, which recently lost its previous commissioner, Department of Labor. Well, I think this is where Zero Hedge tends to get a little political here. But I think more importantly, what's not political are interest rates. And that is the ultimate signal. So let's see what's happening there. In fact, let's go over to the Fed Watch, because that's more signal. And we know that the Fed just came out, they dropped rates by 25 basis points, but they have the next meeting in 28 days. And this is pretty much all you need to know. You don't even need to look at the Treasury market. Yesterday, we had an 89% chance of a cut, and we had a 10% chance of a pause. Now, I think even a couple days prior to that, I remember seeing an 86% chance they were going to cut. So let's just assume that would be a 13% chance roughly that they were going to pause. And as soon as the JOLTS numbers came out today, we go from, let's just call it 86 up to 96%. 96%. So that in and of itself tells you everything you need to know about this JOLTS number that came out today and what the market, or how the market is interpreting it, as far as the further weakening in the labor market, the further weakening in the overall economy. And I'll bet you they're also paying a lot of attention to those construction jobs, because let's just go back to that one more time, because it is so important. When you start to see that roll over, and when you start to see that actually go down, which is kind of what it feels like we might be doing over the next couple of months, that's usually either a precursor to the stuff hitting the fan, or often it's the stuff has already hit the fan. And as an example of that, I'd use the .com bust. You see how we were going up right here, then you start to roll over. That was right at the beginning of the recession. And again, this is a recession as defined by the NBER, not a recession as experienced by 75% of Americans, which we've probably been in for the last 2 years. Then in the GFC, it kind of was a leading indicator. For the recession we had in the early 90s, a leading indicator. So we could, I mean, if this, and it's, the odds are very high. There are no certainties, only probabilities. But the odds are very high that it's not a matter of if this starts to go down. It's simply a matter of when, especially when you look at home prices and the new home prices and what builders are having to do to actually move inventory. I mean, we talked about that last week where they are slashing prices. If you don't believe me, go to Lennar's website and pull up Houston or pull up some market in Florida and look at all the listings. It's like price cut, price cut, price cut, price cut, price cut. And they're having to, obviously, under those conditions, they're not really incentivized to go out there and build a lot more homes until they unload all of this excess supply, basically, from their balance sheet. So what does that do to construction jobs? Most likely it goes down, and we're probably seeing just the start of that right now, which is a very good recession indicator. I think that's really the bottom line here with construction jobs. So let's go back to the calendar one more time, because tomorrow, like I was saying, we get the ADP number. Today, Tuesday, that's the jolts right here that we were talking about, 7.2. Consumer confidence down to 94.2. We discussed that with the conference board. And tomorrow, ADP. So last month, we had a 54,000 number. They're expecting 45. So this is going to be huge, and I'll bet you if we see, way below expectations or way above expectations, it's going to really move the market, and it'll probably really, really move interest rates. So we'll have to pay close attention to that. And then, of course, we got jobless claims, and then Friday's the biggie. That's the non-farm payroll. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. As always, make sure you're standing up for freedom, liberty, free market capitalism, and we'll see you on the next video.